So being worth over $5 million, about to purchase a multi-million-dollar property that's 50 acres, having my own 25-acre farm right here with my wife, and being able to look through and run a business consistently. Kevin O'Leary was recently on the Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett, and one of the most unique things that I learned from that podcast, okay, there's a lot in there. And if there's a person that you meet, right, I think we can all relate to this story where you meet an individual and you just can't stand them. The first time you see them, you're like, this dude's a douche. He's a tool. I don't like him, right? And you don't really get to know him. You don't give him the time of day. You don't give him the chance. And then, a couple weeks or months goes by and you see him again and you recognize like, he wasn't as bad as the first time, but he still did X, Y, or Z, chew with his mouth open and, slurped his drink, his coffee, said a couple things about women, whatever it might be. And you're just like, he's a little better, but I don't really like him that much. And then you keep going on with your normal life, right? And you continue to do what you need to do. And then the next thing you know, you encounter this person at an off chance randomly somewhere for the third time, and they sort of cover their graces with you, and they just say something that sort of pulls you off guard. Wait, what? I don't like this person. You have the guard up, and then you start talking to them, and you start recognizing like, he's okay. He's a little better than the last time. And then you keep going, and then, a couple other times. I've usually found it's around the fourth time that these individuals who I tend to not necessarily detest but not really like, I end up recognizing like, maybe I should have given this individual a chance at a different, at a sooner period. And that's something that I've found with Kevin O'Leary is that I've never really liked the guy. There's just something about him, pretentious, and all these things might be accurate, pretentious, pompous, for sure. But I've never really found him to be overly attractive to myself and as far as consumption is concerned until I watched this podcast. Now, when Bartlett had him on, okay, they end up covering a whole bunch of different topics, and he does show a humanistic aspect of himself. He shows like who he is truly, and even gets to talking about things like marriage and whatnot. But where I want to start with, and honestly, this could end up becoming like a 4 or 5 part series, because I think there's so much information that we could learn from Kevin O'Leary in that podcast that we could apply for normal people. And that's what I want to do right here. Is the first aspect that I immediately was drawn to is that O'Leary starts to talk about when he was working with Steve Jobs. Now, individuals who are 35 to 50 years old will probably remember this game, the Oregon Trail. Okay, so growing up, I played a lot of the Oregon Trail. And this was, I first of all, I'm a history person. I love the Oregon Trail. I love playing it. It's like basically that first version of Sim City, right? It's just so entertaining and educational. And O'Leary was part of the group that worked on the Oregon Trail with Steve Jobs and Apple. And so Stephen Bartlett starts to ask him, like, what was it like to be around Steve Jobs and to work through something like this? And he ends up bringing up a really interesting thing that I think everyone should take away from this video specifically. And there's 4 things he says throughout the video that sort of come back to this concept here. And later on in the podcast, he talks about diligence, okay, and he talks about consequence. He talks about consultants and how they never have to suffer consequence because they're never really bought into anything specifically. But where he goes is he uses this concept of signal and noise, and he takes this from Steve Jobs, and he's going, Jobs had this thought process and this way of analyzing things as signal and noise, okay? And Steve would say something like, if you could analyze, you look at your task for the day, or you look at anything like this for the day, 100% of your work is here, of your time is here, and you have these specific big long-term goals, and then you break them down into time frames, and you can look at, okay, I have these 3 things I have to get done today. That's the signal. Anything outside of that would be the noise. And so he talks about how, somebody like Jobs did a phenomenal job at analyzing the signal and trying to keep away the noise. And this is something that I can relate to as a parent of 4 children, as a business owner of multiple different businesses, of having over 13 employees. is what is noise and what isn't noise, and what is noise in those specific situations. Oftentimes when you're dealing with employees, or you're dealing even with yourself and with children, you've got to basically look at what is the signal and what is the noise. Sometimes you might think that the signal is getting your kid to get off of his, let's say electronic, or getting the kid to do something, some task that you want them to do. But really, they're telling you what the actual signal is. Now, what does this have to do with finances? What does this have to do with anything along those lines as far as what we want to do long term? And this is where he brings up later in the podcast, and he talks about this with prenups, and he says the biggest part around prenups, and I actually want to do another video just devoted to how he views marriage, because I think it's absolutely phenomenal, and even devoted to how he does, how he thinks about mortgages and stuff like that. So if you want me to do that, just comment down below. I'll break that down even further, because I think he does a great job with it, almost in a Dave Ramsey-esque style. Now, what he ends up talking about is he's saying, okay, if we can take these specific signals, right, and we can dial in these three things. And this is where, if you own a business, oftentimes your employees might see the signal as one thing, but you have these visions and you have these ideologies of where you want to strive towards, and they don't see the signal the same way. And then on the flip side, okay, if we are just 100% signal and we don't have any outside noise, we become awkward and we don't handle social settings well. So then the team ends up floundering because there's not good camaraderie, there's not good charisma amongst the team members, right? So, and I think this is even accurate when we're looking at a family. Family is a version of a team. So when we're looking at finances and what that signal and what the noise is, we have to look at those specific goals. And that's where diligence comes in. So he mentions diligence related to prenups, but what I ended up taking from this is, like, we think about diligence being, if you're 25 years old, 30 years old, 35 years old, and you're just starting a family, you have to do due diligence. You have to look at what you want. You have to look at where you want to be. You have to look through all these different factors, right? And if you can look through all those different factors, how much money do you want to have saved? What do you want to do with kids? How do you want to spend your money? Do you want to save your money? Do you want to invest? Do you want to have real estate? Do you not want to have real estate? Do you want to be out of debt? Do you want to have debt? All of those things, that's part of diligence. That's research. That's understanding complex situations. It's going through and doing that due diligence, because then the diligence on the front end establishes the signal. And when you establish the signal, you have more clarity. And then the noise part could be, this channel for me is noise. It's a fun time for me to think outside of my normal businesses, my normal life, my normal realm of sports performance, and I get to experience things through another lens, which could then in theory help me long term with my main venture. But this is a little bit more noise. It's more time for me to think outside the box. And he actually brings up, that was the one thing that Steve Jobs would do. He would study fonts. He would study ancient cultures. He would look at Japanese transcripts and things like that, and think about those fonts related to being on a digital screen or anything along those lines. So when we're looking at this specific aspect, I think the absolute best takeaway for me was having diligence on every single thing that matters in your life, okay? Everything, finances, everything related to a relationship. I'm walking through the woods here. We basically have 20 acres of woods, and it's just like basically a jungle in Pennsylvania, and it's just been pouring rain. So when we look through the diligence factor, then we can think through those lenses and the filters and say, what do I want? What are my goals? Where do I want to be with my family? Where do I want to be with all these other things? And we can set up our financial signals. And those financial signals are what I refer to as dotting the financial I's, crossing the financial T's, looking at things and saying, okay, I want to have, $1 million when I retire. I want to have these retirement funds set up. I want to leave these for this thing for my children. I want to have X, Y, and Z with my finances in line so we don't have any concerns. And then you build upon that financially, and you look at, we got to make more than we spend. Okay. We have to make way more money. We know we can do a little bit more passionate work focusing on those signals. So there's the signals of finances, there's the signals in your interpersonal relationship, there's the signals within your own business and how you can improve and actually make yourself more valuable, which in turn will lead to greater financial success. So signals and noise. Write down the top 3 goals that you have right now. Work towards those top 3 goals. And then you can have 20% of your time is noise. Now, spending time with your family and kids isn't always noise. I did want to clarify that. But then when you dial in the signals for each area of your life, then you do more due diligence on the front end of how you can achieve those signals. And then you recognize what noise could be theoretically, okay? And then you start to see the consequences, good or bad, on the other side. I hope this helps somebody out there. I'll talk to you guys probably from my business trip in Oregon this coming week. Peace.